Well, this little story is about the dapping block. About 20 years ago, I started having these little blocks made because I needed them in my jewelry making. And what you do is you put a piece of jewelry metal in there, sheet metal, and then tap in there with a wooden stake, and it forms a nice curve so that earrings have a nice little shape to them, and sometimes pendants. And then later on, I made just the single-sided block. Well, this one isn't exactly the single-sided block, but I made a much narrower one and sold them on a regular basis to wholesale outlets and so on and so forth. But thanks to eBay and Craigslist, I have been selling them pretty readily just lately.
Now, what you saw in the studio a few minutes ago was the old beat-up versions I've been using for 20 years. And, all rusted out and messed up, but still working just perfectly. And so lately I've been making these using my little cool lathe and a few tools that I had to make in order to get this nice curved shape. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and make a few of these. Actually, I'm going to make 35 because I've been selling the heck out of them. So that's kind of cool. So we'll start by going ahead and sawing them out of a long solid bar of steel. Now if you notice, we've got this bar of steel, and I think it's about 3.5 inches wide, and I had to buy a 12-foot length in order to get any kind of price at all, and it was about $1,000 anyhow. But at that price, it ends up being about $3 a slug. And using my little handy dandy power bandsaw, which I bought 20 years ago or so, and it just continues to work. Just an amazing little saw. You can see that I've got about halfway through this cut here. So I'm cutting 1.5 inches off of the bar. So I'm going to cut 35 of these plugs off of the bar. And then we're going to go ahead and machine them. So we'll go ahead and turn the saw on. You get to see and hear how noisy it is. Drop it down into place. There it goes. And it just kind of cuts away as I go and do something else. Okay, one plug is cut. And we'll just take that off of there, and you can kind of see that it made a nice smooth cut. So that's 1 out of 35. So we've got 34 more to go. That's going to take about 3 or 4 days. And then we'll go ahead and start machining. Okay, it's about 2 days later. We've cut 34 of these. Number 35 is over in the saw as we speak. You can kind of hear it whining in the background. So tomorrow I think we'll go ahead and get started on machining them. Follow along with the machining. We'll have fun. In this whole crazy process is we want to clean up this edge, and you can see that this edge is fairly rough, so we're just going to clean it up with the lathe and make it look nice and finished. And the way we do that, put the glasses on, turn the machine on, crank her up. You can see there's a little bit of a wobble there, and also takes the wobble out. Go. So now it's starting to cut and it's throwing chips all over the place. But other than that, it looks pretty good. I'm going to go halfway through this and then stop and come back and take a second cut, a finished cut, which will be like a real nice clean finish. Okay, we've taken the finished cut. Stop the lathe. Bring it back. And you can see this surface is nice and finished. It's all squared up with the lathe, and then we got to come back in and finish this facing edge too. So we got the surface faced off, we got the roundness faced off, everything is nice and smooth. Now it's time to go in and create the dome, or not the dome, but the cup. So we start with a pretty good sized drill bit. We crank this baby up at a fairly slow speed. You can see it's just barely turning, but when it's turning that slow, it's got lots of torque. So then we can just come in and crank the drill bit into the piece. And you can see it's going to start peeling off pigtails right away. We're going to start with the 6-inch cup, which means that we don't go in as deep as, let's say, the 3-inch cup, because that's going to have a lot of depth to it in order to get that cup to let's see what this looks like. Okay, that looks pretty good. And this is kind of a randomness to it. You can see it's got about a 1/4 inch into that, and then of course the sharpness of the drill bit. So that should do it for that. Let's have a look at it real quick, like. Yeah, you can see that we're going in about 400 thousandths, which is where I want to be. So that's almost a 1/2 inch. Okay, 35 more of these and we're set to go. When I decided to start making the dapping blocks instead of having them made, and really the decision came once I bought my handy dandy lathe made in Czechoslovakia in 1954, and you can see the lathe. Let's get in real close and you can see Czechoslovakia. This is, by the way, you know, of course, behind the Iron Curtain, Czechoslovakia. There it is right there. So when I bought the lathe, I mean, I got a really good price on it, and it was pretty used up. But the ways were good, and most of the mechanisms were good. It's just that the transmission was shot, and I figured, well, you know, it's worth the price if I can rebuild the transmission. So I went in. Oh, down here is the transmission. These two arms go straight into the box where the transmission is. You can see it right about in there. So anyhow, I went in, pulled the transmission, and it was just like a jumble of gears and bearings, and oh, what a mess. So I thought, well, okay, just take it apart one piece at a time, just like the old Chevy transmissions, which I've taken apart many times. And so I took it apart, and it turned out that every bearing in the transmission was a bearing that could be replaced from the auto parts store. And I was just like, for about $300, I rebuilt this transmission. Of course, I didn't have any papers. I didn't have any books on it. Even the books that I had were in Czechoslovakian, so I couldn't read it. So basically, I had to take the transmission apart 9 times and put it back together, just because I'd get one little part wrong and it just wouldn't work. So I'd have to take it back apart again. But, you know, hey, it took about a month. And once I got that done, the dang thing works like a dream. And it's a great old lathe. So, but anyhow, the lathe. So I got the lathe. I can do the dapping blocks. So I had to build, because there wasn't anything for sale. Nobody had a tool that I needed. So I needed a radius tool. And the way you can kind of notice, see how this works, you can see that here's the cutting edge right there. And this cutting edge needs to rotate around this radius right here in order to make its cut, right? So, and we're going to do this by hand because I have it set up, and you can kind of see, well, it's not going to work that well. There we go. And so basically it makes that cut. Now I knew that I had to make that cut
mechanically, because I couldn't do it by hand because it was going to be real rough. So I had to build this little motor to come in and lock in. So I bought these gears from an old Craftsman lathe and set up this worm drive so that this thing would do automatically. Why don't we just go ahead and I'll put it onto the lathe, attach it, and then we can talk about this.
So we're going to get a real view of how this radius tool works. You see I'm just coming in fairly close, and then I turn the worm drive in, and it basically rotates the tool around into the work. You can see in a second it'll start peeling off these really big honking peels of metal. Now, I don't know if you can see from that side, but we're starting to cut a really nice little arc in the piece itself.
Okay, here we're going to be taking a rough cut from a 5-inch dapping block, and you can see how that those chips are peeling away pretty heavy. That's because we got the head moving very slowly. It's got a lot of torque. You can see it's just kind of pulling those peels away, and it's creating a cup. Maybe you can see that inside. Not so much, but we'll take a couple more cuts and then we'll get a better view. Okay, now we got the second cup peeling off here, and you can start to see the cup on the inside there a little bit. Yeah, see it now? As this thing kind of just rotates back out, taking off more material. And you can look just a little bit further in. You can see it looks like we got one more cut, maybe two more cuts to make before we get rid of the old drill bit hole. And that should just pretty much clean it back up again, and then we'll put it on the fast speed and take a little 10/1000ths cut, and it'll be finished. The one non-automatic part of this is I have to rotate the thing back by hand to get it to index back into the work. But that's not a big deal. Okay, one last cut here. You can see it starting to peel away. And then we'll go ahead and set it up on the fast speed. But you have to look at this. Libby. She just loves to sit right by this lathe. I don't get it, but you know, she's a strange cat. Kitty cat. There you are. Okay, here's the final cut. We'll get a little bit more light in on that. You can see we're getting a nice cup out of that. Got the last few cuts here, and we can turn it off and have a look at it. Nice clean cut. Pull it a little tighter there. But the surface is fairly rough, as you can see. So we're going to come back and we're going to speed this thing up and crank it up to a full speed ahead. Scotty, rotate the head back into position. It's going back around, and then slide it up to the tool. Things start spinning. Slide it up to the tool and press against it just a little bit, and then kick our drive gear into gear and let her start rotating, and you can see it's going to start rotating here in a second. There it goes. Takes right off. You can see the cutting bit is peeling off these little dinky peels. If you look just behind it, you can see the line where the cut is being made, and it looks like about 10 or 15 thousandths that we're taking off of that. So that's going to give us a nice clean finish.
And we'll go ahead and look at that in a few minutes. But I'll see if I can get in a little closer. There we go. Nice finished surface. Got real smoothness to it. Has a good look to it. I'm happy. Okay, we're going to dry it off. Get rid of some of the lubricant oils that we've been using to cut it. Keep the bit from getting too hot. And you can see everything is all nice and dried off. That surface is looking really good. So then we come in with a little zip, and this is a sealant. It's kind of like the old Cosmoline, if you're familiar with that, back in the 40s when they used to pack everything in Cosmoline, all the military stuff. And back in the 50s and 60s, we used to go into these army surplus places and buy things and take them out of the package, and they were all packed in this kind of wax-covered oil, which was called Cosmoline. And nowadays, of course, they've got a little bit more high-tech materials. Let's get a plastic bag, put it in the plastic bag. Oh, this is the fun part, because that means there's one more done, and we are one more closer to being done with that 35 that I set up. Okay, and then once it's all set up that way, we find my pin and put 5 inches on it. There we go. And it's a done deal. We take it from there, put it down in our little storage container down at the bottom here, and everybody's happy.